Hello, Lydia. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm here with Lydia Meem. Lydia is the most amazing clinical psychologist, and she'll be joining us in Hobart, sharing her expertise on how we as healthcare professionals can be more neurodiverse affirming in our practice. And in fact, that will be the title of your symposium presentation, Lydia, Neurodiversity Affirm. Why don't you tell me, what's the title of your presentation for us at the Women in the New World Symposium?
I'm not sure, but it's something along the lines of neurodiversity affirming healthcare practice.
Yes. Yes. And that, it's something that, you and I were just kind of saying offline before, it's something that I feel incredibly excited to be creating a space for conversation around in the practitioner world, that we spend a lot of time in, especially in our little kind of natural healthcare practitioner bubble around learning all of our biochemistry and our herbs and our digestive physiology. But there's so much more to providing comprehensive healthcare than just knowing which bone connects to which bone and which cell talks to which cell. And that's why we wanted to bring in someone with your kind of expertise to help us fill some of the gaps that we might not quite be meeting. So tell us a little bit about your background.
So I'm a clinical psychologist. I specialize in autism, and I'm sort of across a bunch of different things. I run a practice in Newcastle where I see children, adolescents, adults, couples, families, where somebody in the family is autistic, and then and I have several practitioners working with me doing that. And then I also run workshops for teachers and psychologists around Australia. So pre-COVID, I was doing that physically, traveling around Australia, exploring and meeting new people all the time and that kind of thing. More recently, it's been through Zoom and those kinds of things. So that's been, a bit of a pivot, but I'm hoping to do kind of a combination of those things going forwards. And I'm also writing a handbook for psychologists around assessments, and I supervise a lot of psychologists. So lots of different things really. Yeah, but all around autism.
Which is, as I kind of alluded to before, is an area where healthcare professionals have a lot more to learn than just how does autism affect people, I guess, on the kind of biochemical level, or the more explicit healthcare space.
Yeah.
It's certainly an area where I always want to make sure that I am having autistic people in my life as well has been a real point of awareness for me around communication, especially.
Yeah, definitely.
This is an area where, we really acknowledge your expertise, and where, as a representative of the practitioner community, where I'm really looking forward to learning more about how I can be more neurodiverse affirming in my, not just in my kind of healthcare practice, but in my everyday communication. And a great example of that is, I sent you a couple of emails in the lead up to arranging this kind of webinar chat, and you sent me back the most interesting response around language. Could you talk a little bit about the importance of language when approaching issues around neurodiversity?
Yeah, so there's been a few waves of the way that we talk about autism, and I guess we started off with a really medicalized model. And so say if you think of like the 50s and 60s doctors, and sometimes you see this if you go into an emergency department now, because people are using a real shorthand, you might hear doctors and nurses saying, oh, there's a broken leg in bed 6. And of course it's attached to a person. We all know that, but people would just have this shorthand, and so people would talk about autistic people, just autistics or paraplegics or asthmatics or epileptics, as though
very depersonalizing.
Very depersonalizing. So very much, that person is a bundle of symptoms, and there's nothing more to that person. They don't have any personality or prior experience or trauma or any of the other things that, just like sense of humor. It's just all about this diagnosis. And so then there was understandably a pushback. So it came along, especially around the social model of disability, which came through in about the 70s, recognizing that disability is often a social thing, that because our our systems are set up for typically developing people, that people experience disability when they come across things that are not designed for them. So people in wheelchairs experiencing barriers when they hit stairs, or there's no elevator for them or something like that. And so it's not about that they're in a wheelchair, like they can move around, but it's when buildings are blocking them from getting in, that's the problem. And so it's about the whole of society taking responsibility for that and adjusting things. So that started in the 70s, and so part of that first movement was about recognizing this is a person and they happen to have something going on for them, and we all have different things going on for us at any time. And so we started using person with autism, student with autism, woman with autism, that kind of stuff.
So we're putting the person's identity.
That's person first language, and that has been much better than medical language. But now in the last 10 years or so, identity first language has come to the fore. And that one is for people who have grown up with person first language going, yeah, I know I'm a person, but actually the autism is really important to me. And I want to put that up front because I'm really proud of it. And I'm part of a really proud autistic community. And so there's things like the Autistic Women's Network, those kinds of things where they're putting autistic in there and reclaiming that word as a positive thing.
That's interesting, because I have a friend who's recently been diagnosed with autism in her late 30s, and she said the most affirming part of it was feeling like she was part of a community where she felt understood.
Yeah, I just got my assessment done in February of this year as well. And so I'm really happy that I'm part of the club as well. And none of my clients were surprised. My mum was a bit surprised. My siblings were all like, yeah. So, because when we were kids, we thought, so autism's definitely in my family. Dad's definitely autistic. And then a couple of my nephews were diagnosed. And we thought that it somehow skipped a generation, but no, it got all four of us. We just also, bright and off doing things. And so, they're a bit like me. They've created jobs in their special interests. And so we look like we're coping really well. But we still have sensory sensitivities, still have worries about communication and,
And something else that I've become aware of as well is that so much of what we have been taught to understand about the typical autism presentation is based on the experiences of male people with
yes. So lots and lots of the studies, lots of the tools are designed around boys and men. And when I started in autism back in 1994, they were talking about there being 16 boys for every girl who was diagnosed with autism.
Right.
And they thought that was a genetic thing. And there will always be more boys than girls with most genetic disorders because they're X-linked. And so girls have more options. We have more options, so we'll light up different pieces, whereas boys have to express all, whatever they've got to express it all. And so tend to notice it more. But but there's a lot of girls that get missed, and I see a lot of teenage girls who've been autistic as children but been told that they were anxious or a bit abrupt, and then adults, women who are coming out who have been diagnosed with bipolar disorder or even borderline personality disorder, lots of anxiety, depression, that kind of stuff, but not autism. And often the treatments around those other things haven't really worked for them. They just didn't sit right. And they were like, like I can try these the anxiety strategies, for example, but it's not really hitting the spot. And then when we kind of unpack it and go, well, what are you anxious about? Oh, new situations, meeting new people, having someone mess up my routine, sensory sensitivity. That sounds like autism. So it's been really good to find that out.
It's so wonderful to see how, as we are learning more about diversity in humans in general, that our learning around autism and neurodiverse presentations would you say it's keeping pace, or would you say it's moving along?
Oh, it's really blossoming so fast, I think.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fantastic. And there's,
I think there's heaps of research now that shows that there's brain changes in the womb in autistic people.
wow, yeah.
So we do neural pruning and neuroplasticity differently. Autism differently, not wrong or any of that stuff, but just differently. And so autism is part of normal human neurodiversity, and so part of my work is like working with teachers and helping them to implement the strategies across the whole classroom, because of course the strategies that work for people with for autistic people work with other people as well. Nobody minds too much if we know what the program is and there's visuals and things are a bit predictable. It's not too noisy.
It feels like we're kind of, or you in particular, are working hard to build a world that is kinder to everyone.
Yeah. And I think like a lot of what I do is try to explain, well, from an autistic point of view, you think you're just asking this simple thing, but actually you're asking for these 5 things to happen. And if you could ask it in this way, that would make a lot more sense to someone rather than getting them to guess what it is that you want. And so it's almost like being an interpreter sometimes, of trying to help people understand where the neurotypicals are coming from and where the neurodiverse people are coming from.
My goodness, it's really highlighting to me the importance of clear communication. And this is why I'm so thrilled to have you take the limelight at our Women in the New World Symposium, and you'll have a captive audience of the most beautiful practitioner community. I mean, I'm looking at the names of the people I know who have bought tickets, and you are going to be with some of the brightest, most generous, kindest, loveliest practitioners, and I'm so excited to see them learn from you and work together to create a more affirming, more inclusive, kinder world going forward. Feels like magic.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see some of the other presentations as well. I know Tammy and Jules and Kira. I've met them, and so I'm really looking forward to seeing their presentations, and it seems like there's heaps of really good stuff.
Really good stuff, and I feel like there's going to be something for everyone. Everyone will be nourished in different parts of their brain and different parts of their learning, and I think we'll all learn things that will surprise us as well. And I can't wait to see you there in the flesh in Hobart.
So exciting.
With our community, with our incredible lineup of speakers. And I'm again looking much further beyond that. I'm really excited to think about the changes that you will really stimulate the genesis of going forward in the communication of all of our practitioners as well. So huge thank you in advance for all the good that I know your wisdom is going to bring forward in our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you in October. Thanks, Lydia.
Bye. Thanks.